on page on page Tes, line 20. That's the third paragraph on the page, and we were speaking about the idea of coming from Rosh Hashanah into Sukkot, that one comes into the other, and because one comes into the other, there needs to be a way of organization. It cannot just jump levels. It has to go from Makif to Pnimi. It comes from the highest level, and then it comes down, etc. And then we were saying that also that the Chiddush of Rosh Hashanah is the level of the Baal Tshuva, that the Rochek is Nasa Karev, the one that was distant is becoming close. And that is a Chiddush. That's the level of the Baal Tshuva. That's a Chiddush, that though he was in a place that was Rochek, it comes Karev. So therefore, it's a Chibur of Havchim. It's a joining of opposites. And this joining of opposites is expressed in Rosh Hashanah itself, that we go from the constraints, Min HaMeitzar, Karasi Yud-Kei, Anoni V'Merchav Yud-Kei, that we're going from the constraints, which is symbolized by the narrow end of the shofar, to the broadness, symbolized by the broad end of the shofar. The same thing. It says that we go from the year that begins in a poor fashion. It will be rich at the end, but it doesn't mean at the end of the year. It means it'll lead immediately from it to a level of riches. So this is what we find, that in Rosh Hashanah, the idea of tshuva, the idea of shofar, is about joining opposites. In that way as well, we're about to explain, since Sukkot is a continuation of the revelations of the aspects and the ideas of Rosh Hashanah, so Sukkot is also going to be about bridging opposites as well. Again, page Tes, line 20. Since the matters of Rosh Hashanah come out revealed in the Yontiv of Sukkot, like we brought down the pasuk by Kesel Yom Chagenu, that which is concealed Kisui comes out to the day of our Yontiv of Sukkot. Therefore, also in the Yontiv of Sukkot, there is the idea of joining of opposites. Teshbу, beginning from the idea that it says that you should settle in Sukkot. And we asked, that's seemingly a contradiction. A sukkah is a temporary dwelling, and settling means being bekvias. It's the idea of keva, not aray. Sukkah on its own is something that's temporary. Va'afal became nasa b'ha'inyan teshvu, still and all comes by the idea of being settled, melosh nakavav, from the word that it's something that's set and remains over there, and not just settled, but also vad l'teshvu shivas yomim, until it's the idea of being settled for 7 days, that we said the number 7 indicates the entire creation, shekol kol zman habriya k'niskalei, like we mentioned before, that the number 7 includes the entire time of creation. Also the idea that your generations should know that in Sukkot I settled them, that we said that Yediyah is an in of Pnimius, especially the idea of Das is something that permeates the person of Pnimius. But Sukkah is transcendent, it's Makif, it's encompassing. Sukkah, when you're not Makif, Sukkah is transcendent. Still, and all through the Sukkah, we reach a level of Yedu, that's the level of internalize, because it's the continuation of Rosh Hashanah. And just like Rosh Hashanah is about joining opposites, so too Sukkah is also about the joining of opposites. This is also what it says. Kol Ezra b'Yisrael Yeshu b'Sukkos, that every citizen amongst the Yidden will be settled in Sukkot. Why does he use the word Ezra, top of page Yud? The Hindim before L'Kutei Torah, it's explained in L'Kutei Torah, Ubekam Mekaymis in many places, She Ezra Chuloshen Osid. Ezra, when used as a verb, from the word shining, like Zrichas Hashemes, Zrichas Chama, sun shining, and so on, by having the letter Aleph before it, that indicates that it's in future tense. Sharia Oisius Ason, the letters Aleph, Yud, Saf, Nun, Shaboim, Beresha Teva, Moritz Allah Asid, when they're placed at the beginning of a word, they make the word into future tense. So if it were said, let's say, Zorach, that would mean past tense, it's shown. Ezrach means I will shine. The Ezrach, the word Ezrach is not just meaning citizen or someone that's a regular inhabitant of the land, but it's also the word shining. So when you put these two things together, Aleph is future tense, the Zorach is from the word shining. So this means Hainu Masha Asid Lezroyach La'asid Lavoi. This is what's going to be shining when Mashiach comes. So what does that have to do with Sukkot? Valzen Namra Basukos Teishu Goymer. Call Lazarach Yisrael Yeshu Basukos. That's what it says in Sukkot. You will settle, you will dwell, and every Ezrach Yisrael will dwell in the Sukkot. That we said it seems to be repetitive. You already told me that everybody will be settled in Sukkot. Basukos Teishu, it's going to all Yidden. Why does it have to go again? Why does it have to repeat it again? Because it comes to teach you this. Through settling in the sukkah for 7 days. So then, everything that's going to shine, eventually, when Mashiach comes, Yeshu Basukas Ato, will already be settled in the sukkah now. Already now, we will have an experience of Mashiach's times. Fulfillment of the mitzvah, since the purpose and the idea of this mitzvah is the joining of opposites, like we mentioned earlier. Therefore, when Mashiach comes, we will also experience, even now we can experience the revelation of Mashiach's times, which will be the ultimate joining of opposites. So now the Rebbe is going to connect this also with the other mitzvahs that we do on Sukkot, namely the Daled Minim. This idea of the uniting of opposites and different things. Is Gimel line 12. Hine kol amar le'il, everything that we mentioned earlier. It's also concerning the matter that says, as a continuation to and following the idea that in Sukkot you will settle for 7 days. What does it say afterwards? What do you do once you've already moved into the Sukkot? What's the next stage? This is what it says in the pasuk, by Yom Harishon. You will take for yourselves on the first day, meaning that the mitzvah that we're talking about now has to do with daytime. By Yom Dafka, specifically by Yom, Kikim mitzvah sukkah miyad baschos hashivas yomim b'leilachag. When you come to the sukkah begins at the beginning, right away at the start of the 7 days. As soon as the evening falls of Sukkot, we already are obligated in the mitzvah of Sukkot. Well, and following that, by Yom Harishon, during the first day, during the daylight hours, either from when the sun rises, or even from when the dawn begins, then there is the idea in the mitzvah of you shall take for you the 4 kinds. Like it's known, the explanation of the Reb Marash about the mitzvah of the Daled Minim. These are not 2 separate things. It's not that we have the mitzvah of Sukkot is one mitzvah, the mitzvah of the Daled Minim is a different mitzvah. But rather, the experience and the makif of the Sukkah is afterwards coming down in the Lakachtam Lachem. Like the expression used concerning this, Makif Shuinas Sukkah. That the makif, that's the idea of Sukkah, Nimshach B'Pnimis, comes down internally. Through taking through the fulfillment of the mitzvah of taking the 4 minim. For this, the reason why it says seemingly redundant expression. Why does it say ulakachtem lachem? You shall take to you. It should say you shall take ulakachtem lachem by Yom Rishon. So apichsidis, the reason why it says the word lachem, this idea, the idea of the taking the daled minim, comes in a way that it's to you, it comes into you. It's something internalized, similar to what we spoke about before, that the sukkah itself is taking the makif and bringing it into pnimius. You have the makif and still in all your teshvu, which is pnimius. You have the 7 days, etc., etc. So you have the makif coming into the pnimi. Even further, and even more so, the makif coming into the pnimi, we have the taking of the daled minim, and this is connected also with the fact that we have to keep and hold the daled minim by our heart, the level of the pnimius of the person, and this is associated also according to Kabbalah. Kabbalah in Kabbalah expression line 26, Sham Shochi v'chinas nukve dezer ampin ha'emedes b'chaza dezer ampin. It's talking about the malchus of the midos that's standing in the chest of the level of Ze'er Ampin of the Midas. Meaning that you have this level of this chest, physical chest, we hold it against our physical chest, and the same thing, we're bringing it down into the most pneumistic level in the spheres above. Putting aside the Kabbalah expressions, what's the simple idea? That by every single yid, it comes down in an internalized fashion by taking the lulav and esrog. All the matters that are the beginning of the 7 days of Sukkot were in the way of makif, so he's now drawing that down in the pnimis. This means in addition to the pnimius that there is of Laman Yedum, that we said already, the knowledge, the level of Das is pnimius. Sheyeshne miyad hachiyuv, the miyad bascholos im hachiyuv, the besukos teshvu. This is to be found immediately when you have the obligation of besukos teshvu. It says as soon as you're at night and you have besukos teshvu, it says Laman Yedu. You need to know, and knowledge is the idea of pnimius. But then, following that, there's a further level. And this itself has added another idea. That becomes internalized of this fact that your generation should know that I settled the Eden in Sukkot. And how does that become even more internalized? How does this go in an even more internal fashion? This comes about through taking of the 4 kinds, how that makes it come down in a greater pnimius. And to understand that, how it comes down in a greater pnimius, that he's going to explain starting the next paragraph by the whole idea that's always brought down in many places in Chassidus about the unity and the oneness that's to be found in the Daled Minim, and that is expressed even more, the idea of the Pnimius and the Achdus and the union of opposites that's to be found. Any questions before we go on? Second paragraph on Yud Aleph.
So is the Lulav like a spiritual antenna that's pulling down this energy somehow?
I guess if you want to describe it that way. Every mitzvah acts as that type of spiritual antenna. But I guess you like the actual look of it, that it looks, the lulav looks like an antenna.
The cock is like a radar dome.
Mm-hmm. Okay, line 6, page Yud Aleph, second paragraph. The idea behind this is it's explained in the Mamorim of Sukkot, in general, in different Mamorim of the Rabbeim, ubefrat b'siddur, especially the Mamorim of Sukkot that are brought down in the Siddur im Dach. So it says in the Arbon minim, the idea of the four species, the four kinds. The reason why specifically these four kinds were chosen for this mitzvah of the Daled minim, is because they are different and distinct than all other fruits and all other trees. Because all of the four kinds, all of them indicate oneness and unity. The Hinir Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, you shall take for you gomer kapois. It says fronds of date palms. Kapois Chsiv, it says what out of, which can be read either singular, or it can mean from the word of pirushay kafus, that means that it's bound, meaning it says if it's bound together, it has to be like looking like one, not like the palm leaves that are already spread apart. This means the afal pisha b'lulav yesh kama olim, though in a lulav there are many leaves. Not only that, but every leaf has like two halves. It's like joined at the back. It's like an opening or a split in the rest of it. It has to be in such a way that the leaves are ready to, and we're able to bind them with the spine. It's not that you have the leaves itself have to be close enough and closed enough that they're able to be bound. This means we join the leaves. That on their own they were able to be separated, and you are now joining them. So here we see the first thing of unity, and that is in the lulav. And so too in the Anaf Eitz Ovis, the branch of the Ovis Eitz. It's talking about the Hadassim shetzrichim liis tlosa b'chad kina. That means shloisha olin b'kein echad. There needs to be 3 leaves coming out of one like stem area. V'hainu shemeshloisha oisim echad. This means that from 3 you're turning it into 1. Aidei shemekashrim mechabrim is called shloisha b'yachad, through tying and binding all the 3 together. Valderach Zarov is the same thing. Zarov is the willows Shnikroim Achvona. That in the Lashon of the Gemara, Aravas are called Achvona. Why are they called Achvona? Hashem Shegdelim Ba'achva, because they grow in a way of the fraternity, togetherness, brotherhood. Because there's a lot. If you ever seen the Aravas trees, like a lot, like one on top of each other. This means so it has to be willows in the plural. Still, it has to be in such a way that they're called a brother. Through the fact that they are growing in a brotherhood fashion. That's the idea of oneness and unity. We are uniting and joining 2 things to be like one. Similar to this, the beautiful fruit of a tree, the Chazal derived from the word hadar. Read it as if it says hadar, the one that lives, dwells, that it lives in its tree for an entire year. Other fruits are seasonal. Parts of the year they're on the tree, parts of the year they're growing, parts of the year the tree is barren. The esrog is there for an entire year. The entire year the esrog is on a tree. The meaning behind this is top of the Pejud Bays, even though throughout the 12 months of the year there are changes. And we had this in a different mind, but that's the meaning of the word shana. Shana is from the Hebrew word for year. Shana is the word shinui. It's changes. To such a degree that there's extreme changes. Like the expression of the pasuk, There's 6 seasons in the Torah. There's planting, there's harvesting, there's cold, and there's hot, and there's summer, and there's winter, and these are going on like different periods of time, like two months each of these. So there's such extreme different changes in the weather. Still in all, still despite all those weather differences, he dwells on this tree for the entire year, in all the 6 atmospheres, the 6 different climates, the 6 different temperature changes. And then the Rebbe adds over here a deeper nuance. It's not just that it encompasses and survives all 6 temperature changes, but v'oidza is line 5. In addition to this, like the Rebbe Marash adds concerning this, inyan nifla, an unbelievable thing. Not only is the esrig able to handle all the changes throughout the year, that it doesn't affect him, it doesn't become in any way negatively impacted by the weather change. Allah Adrab, the Marash emphasizes just the opposite. It grows in every single climate, and therefore it's as the result of the climate. This means that the change of the climate that adds the growth of the esrog. Like the Rebbe Marash has a very powerful examination of this, that we must say that it's growing. To say that it's on the tree and it's living as dwelling without growing, that's impossible. It would have become ruined. Why? It would start rotting, and similar to that, if it would have been on the tree and not growing, if you, like we always say, if you don't go up, you go down, then that would be rotting away. Since it's living in the tree throughout the entire year, despite the different changes of the atmospheres and climates from one extreme to another extreme, how they move, and so it's understood. Not only does he overcome these differences, it's not only that he's existing despite the atmospheres, despite the climate change, but just the opposite. That the change itself is used in such a manner that from the change itself contributes to the growth of the esrog. So now the Rebbe is going to say, based on this understanding, this is how the esrog stands apart from all the other of the 4 kinds. The lulav, the hadassim, the arovis, they don't have the unity contributing. Over here, the unity of all the different parts contribute. So he says in line 17, this is an unbelievable advantage in the idea of the unity, also concerning in comparison to the unity of all the other 3 types. That in them the unity is in such a way that they're taking matters that could be separated and could be distinct, and you're turning them into something that's one. So in other words, there's a potential for disparity, there's a potential for separation. The leaves of the lulav could be separated, the willows could be separated, the leaves on the hadas could be separated, and instead, by the hadas, the leaves are growing out of one the branch, and the lulav is all can be bound together, and the arabas are grown all on top of each other. But by esrig it's added another matter. Not only are there separated things that are in a way of unity, like you have the separate climates that are all being absorbed and survived within the Esrim, to such degree that you can live in this tree throughout all the changes. Even more so, from this itself is increased and becomes the growth in the idea of unity, that they all contribute. Every distinct part, every separate part contributes to the unity of you. Until the way the Rebbe Marash adds over there, like it seems to be, that its growth is over a period of time of 3 years, that over 3 years is completed its entire growth completely. V'nimtza comes out, three times you have the different climates of the entire year contributing. This indicates even more so on the power of the unity, because in 3 times you have the idea of a chazaka, of that something that shows of strength and validity, etc., etc. Top of page Yud Gimel, line 1. Moving for this is understood. The idea of the unity that's in the 4 kinds. It's also in a way of joining opposites as well. It's not like the idea of unity that's in Yom Kippurim. It's called Yom Echad. It says Yom Echad. So it says that the Medrash Darshans is going Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim is called the day of oneness. And also the big divat. In Yom Kippur, there's the idea of the linen garments of the Kohen Gadol, that even the Kohen Gadol has to wear at least certain times the linen garments. And what's the idea of big divat? So the Gemara doesn't know exactly, or is trying to figure out what does bad have to do with the word linen. So the Gemara derives this from the word davar ha'olam and akarka bad bevad kan yichidi, something that goes out of the ground, that grows from a single stalk. It's not that you have a few stalks growing out together; it grows out singly. So in other words, its singleness shows that's oneness. So Yom Kippur already has oneness, but the oneness of Yom Kippur, he's going to explain, is not as great as the oneness of Sukkot, because the oneness of Yom Kippur is just oneness itself. Yom Echad, or Bad Echad, like we said, it's one stalk. But rather, how do you have the oneness of Sukkot, that you have a oneness that comes out of multiplicity, like the Rebbe spoke about that in U.S. currency. It says e pluribus unum. It comes from the many into one. It says in line 6, Allah Achdus is dafke ba'ifin sheyesh kama olam shecholim lis nefradim. The unity is specifically in such a way that there can be many branches that are possible to be separated. To such a degree that the lulav of every leaf could be separated, and every leaf is made up of 2 parts. The same thing that Dasim and Aravas also have a potential for separation. Until an esrik that hasn't all the changes of atmospheres, climates. And specifically, you take the different climates, you unite them. You take all the different branches, you take all the different leaves, and you make a unity. That's a higher level than the unity of each stalk growing up by itself. Similar to the advantage of tshuva, that from a distance you became close. Just like from the multiplicity you're making unity. Therefore, it's insufficient to have kinds that show an ordinary unity, because then you don't show this idea of multiplicity coming one. Just like the Baal Tshuva comes from the Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, comes from the state of distant, comes close. There has to be specifically those kinds of growing vegetation, that there are matters that seemingly are separated. And from these separations, we make an idea of unity and oneness, just like the Baal Tshuva that's mirachik nasaka.